Forward. There we go. 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to the Gonzo Experience. So honored and excited that you're joining us today. Totally appreciate it. There are thousands and maybe millions of podcasts out there now, and you have chosen to listen to the Gonzo Experience today. So I want to let you know I really appreciate it. Going to try to bring you some great value today. Today I have in a show a great guest. She's a local friend here in Rochester, but that she does not limit herself to Rochester. She is doing business all over the country, if not the world. I want to welcome to the show Lori Sussle Bonanni. Lori, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited. Lori, I met you a few years ago through Justin Copey, who owns a local business here, Innovative Solutions, and great guy. And you were doing some work for him. And I believe you were going to do some work for the book that we co-published, that I co-published with Justin. And of course, it came out in March of 2020. And so with COVID hitting that month as well, our first pandemic in our lifetime, the book tour and promotion kind of got put on hold, unfortunately. But I got to meet you. So that was a good experience. So, Lori, I know, that you are very involved in helping companies with their public relations, their promotions, their marketing, and their just general communications. That's one of the things you do. Instead of reading your bio word for word, I would love to have you tell us what you do and give us your journey. And then we're going to really parlay that into helping the Gonzo family, who, many of them are small to medium-sized entrepreneurs. And so how can we take these real high level, very professional strategies that you offer the businesses that you work with, and how do we relate them to the small business environment? So, Lori, all yours.
Sure. So my elevator pitch is that I build and grow companies' reputations to increase awareness, business results, and credibility. And you might be asking what that means. And it means that I call myself a non-traditional publicist. So I am not limited to just PR, but more broader communication strategies. So from strategy to execution, I help companies, typically from startups to global 500s with their communication needs. My journey, a very abbreviated version, is that I started my career in public relations and healthcare communications, and worked with every pharma brand you could imagine. But most of the work that I was doing was end of life care. So I was it was all outside of the United States. So everything that I was going to, I was meeting patients of these devastating diseases. And I would find myself like in the hotel room crying after these conferences because I was meeting people who were ultimately on their deathbed. And my friends were working in like Burger King and Nike and like having like grand time. So I was there for about 4 years. I left there. I went to DDB, which is a worldwide, conglomerate of marketing and advertising agencies. And I joined the business development team. And to my surprise, I was actually hired there because of my pharma experience. But that was a little less deathbed drugs. But I also, from there, I worked on anything from tires to toilet paper, B2B to automotive. I worked on basically every brand. But the two things that they had in common, which you'll see as a common thread, the company that I worked for first was actually their first day in New York City was my first day. They were a very established firm in Europe. And then at DDB, my boss had taken over the new business department a couple of weeks before I got hired. And so we built the department to about 8 people by the time I left, and had the most successful years the agency had ever seen. And then I left there. I was there for about 5 years, and I went to NBC Universal, which also sounds like a gigantic corporation. The division I joined had just been acquired. So if you work at NBC, you're called a peacock. And so we were baby peacocks because the company was brand new to the NBC portfolio. And there I was director of marketing, worked on added value campaigns for customers who were buying TV spots. Then I took a sabbatical. I went to South America and traveled solo from, I flew into Buenos Aires and out of Guayaquil, Ecuador. And that was just because it was a dream of mine. And it was also, I just needed something more than like a 2-week vacation. And I had been to the continent before and really just wanted to see more. So when I came back, I had set them some things in place for freelance work, and I was going to be looking for a full-time job. I love freelancing so much. I wound up doing it for over a year and a half because I sort of gave up on the job search. When I finally got back into the job search, I relocated from New York City to Atlanta for an opportunity with a company called World 50, which brings together C-suite executives from the Global 1000 to, have private conversations and bring in great thought leaders. And so I was the first ever director of marketing there. And that company had been around for about 10 years before I joined and never had a director of marketing. So this like entrepreneurial thread continued through my career. And then after about a year and a half, I got laid off. We decided to relocate back north and didn't know where we were going to go, and moved in with my mother-in-law for a little while, which is how I went up in Rochester. And while we were here, I started picking up freelance outside of Rochester, but I was working with Verizon and a couple of SaaS startups out on the West Coast. And after about 8 months, of working at my mother-in-law's dining room table, I said, I think I could live here. And I don't love snow, so it was a really big thing to do that. And after my husband picked his jaw up off the floor, I said, I need 2 things. I need to have my own company, and because I really love what I'm doing, and I also need a snow plow because we need to hire a plow service.
Yes.
So he agreed to both. And so I have had my company. I was still considered a freelancer. And then in 2018, I filed for an LLC and made it official. And so I have my company now, and I've worked with clients all over the country and in a couple of other countries. And I just have a lot of fun doing it. And every client has a different need. And so while I fall into technology, healthcare, medical devices, education, food and beverage, and travel and tourism, my background, because I've worked on every vertical out there, really brings in, an interesting perspective.
No, thanks for that. And I'm glad that your short little pit stop in Rochester turned into a permanent vacation. And, it's funny about Rochester. We, certainly get snow from December until about March. And it used to be a lot worse when I was a kid. I don't know if it's global warming or whatever, but we probably get like a quarter of the snow that we used to. Right. So for me, this is nothing. Right. And, but it's, Rochester is funny. It's a city that has a reputation. Like, it's hard to get people to move here, but once they're here, it's hard to get them to leave. Right. Because it's still the suburbs of Rochester, still kind of a Mayberry experience. Right. I mean, the schools are great. The families are great. You can leave your car unlocked. I mean, it's still, and there's so many cultural attractions and, festivals and all this stuff going on. So glad you stayed.
We've explored lots of outdoors.
Oh,
and I think
so many parks. Letchworth, right? The Grand Canyon of the East, right? There's so many things to do. Yeah.
Before the pandemic, we would go to Toronto quite a bit. So yeah. So
location wise, it's pretty cool because we're driving distance from Toronto, Boston, and New York City, right? So the biggest city in Canada we can be in about less than 3 hours. The biggest city in America, New York, we can be there. I can be there in 5 hours. I don't know about anybody.
I can do 5. I can do 5.
Yeah. I've done 5. And then, Boston, which, Boston, as I say it, I think I love New England. And, we're about 5 hours away from Boston as well. So, and a direct flight to Chicago, which I love as well. So, but anyway, so thank you for your journey. Thank you for sharing that with me. I wanted to get a little bit more granular about, taking your skills and, you might have to give away a little bit of your secret sauce. But, the Gonzo family, like I said, a lot of us are small to medium sized business entrepreneurs. We don't have the budgets of a Pfizer or a Verizon, right? As you're talking about, we have the budgets of like a Happy Meal. So, yeah, if you were to take your great strategies and skills and make them more affordable and bite size, for a small business person, how would you help the small businesses and with what you do?
Sure. So we can get into that certainly, but I do have a bite-sized offer because I was getting asked so much from small business owners, like, how can you help me? I don't have those budgets. And so last year I developed a one-to-one advisory, which some people have referred to as a power hour. And so I have like a process, and basically we have an hour or 3 hours to ultimately, move your business forward. And it's basically pick my brain session, but at the end you get an actionable plan. And from there you can go and DIY your communications depending on your needs. And so it's an opportunity to, kind of focus on your business instead of in your business. And I can provide a fresh perspective. So that's something that I do offer, and that's on my website. But in terms of, what to do, in terms of, communicating effectively, I would start there, being able to work on improving written communications, asking productive questions, and avoiding jargon, I think are 3 of the key things in terms of communicating effectively. So many people want to just throw in, SAT words when they're not necessary, and when they just want to elevate it. So if you can't tell your mom what you do eloquently and succinctly, like, we've got a problem. And a good example of that is actually my dad, who is a retired electrician, so doesn't have, a business background. He is retired and called me one day and said, "I have a lead for you." I was like, "Okay, Dad." Sure.
Cute, right?
Yeah. So I get on the phone, and sure enough, it's a great lead, and it winds up into a proposal and work together. And it came from my dad. And
Wow.
and I was not expecting that. But then it made me realize, like, I had boiled down to what I do so succinctly that my dad had recognized what a good lead was for me. So I always say, if you can,
make it dad electrician proof, then you're
and my dad, I mean, he's a very smart man, but he is retired, and it's like, oh, my daughter's wonderful, but like this, he really knew what this guy needed. I don't know how they started talking about business. And he was like, my daughter can do that. Like, and
no, he understood. I mean, it's a different industry, and you might not understand what your dad does when he starts talking about all the wires and everything. But so, I mean, you got it to be, Vern Harnish, who started EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. He used to say something great. He still does say it, is that, make your value proposition stupidly simple, right? Just make it so simple that, like anybody from outside your industry can get it within like 10 seconds. This is what I do. This is how I help people, and just to make it stupidly simple so that anybody could understand it. So obviously that's what you did. So good for you.
And your lead can come from your dad,
Yeah. Did you give him a commission?
I said thank you. So.
He wouldn't take it, right?
I was like, more of that. That's great. So, so that was great. So I think, being able to communicate effectively, number one, is the biggest piece of it. And I think a lot of people stumble. I think there's a lot of people that are good writers that don't have confidence. I think there's people that are okay writers that might have too much confidence, but I think being able to write and speak eloquently and being able to be succinct is super, super important. So my little hack for that is a website called Grammarly, which I'm sure everyone might be familiar with, but I've actually started using it sort of like as a game, because I do think I'm a good writer. And so I want to make sure that my score is over 95. And if you have a lower score, it tells you how to fix your grammar. So I've gamified Grammarly for me, but I do think it is a great tool for people. And if you upgrade, you can they would tell you like the tone of your voice and all of that sort of interesting information if you're not a confident writer. So that would be one little hack. Another one would be in terms of getting press.
I like that. Like I'll give you an example. Let's say I have a small company and I have a new product launch, or I'm having an event, something that I just want to, get out. And, frankly, I don't have 10 grand to do that. How do I do that?
So depending on what your goal is and who your people are, local publications and, news stations are a great way to do that. So there are always event pages that you could, submit your information on that would be then found on Google. You can create an event, through an Eventbrite link or something like that. But then reaching out to like a local business journal to, either feature you and or your event would be a great thing. Making a Facebook event about it, using social, using your network, using LinkedIn, being able to promote it that way is a really good, kind of a low hanging fruit for people to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I've done that. I've done a lot of that, right? I've done a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. And so you're saying you don't have to have a PR firm, that you could just reach out to, the business journal, local newspapers, radio stations, TV stations. How do you do that? I mean, who are you asking for?
Research. You want to find somebody that might like, at any publication, there's people that cover different things. So for example, like if I'm reaching out to a tech publication, but I'm working on a AI client, certainly somebody that covers SaaS is not going to be my contact. So really understanding who that target is and who writes about that. So that's, research and a little bit of my secret sauce, but being able to find the right person is key. And so, looking at the masthead, looking at LinkedIn, looking at who's at the company and figuring that out that way is super helpful. And if the event is virtual, the sky's the limit in terms of who you can reach out to.
What are some tips on how to write a press release or an email that's going to grab some attention?
So press releases. Oh, there's some bad ones out there.
Yes, there are.
So I would definitely look at companies that you admire and look at that format. So if you're not going to hire somebody to write that press release, take a format of one that you like and see what the overarching is. You might not need to include, privacy statements and public information and stock market and stuff like that. But certainly the shell of it is there on a well-written one. And being the one writing it for a small business, I would have people read it. I would have people reread it. One of the tricks that I use when I write is to read something backwards after it's written, because you can catch something if it's supposed to be on or of, and spell check won't catch that because it's a real word. But I would just make sure there are absolutely no typos. It's written well. It is very clear to understand, easy to understand. And what is the point? And my biggest tip is do not include the kitchen sink. What is the one thing you want to share in this release? What is the information that is the point of the release? Because there are so many that just want to stuff the kitchen sink in there.
What's that?
There's so many that just want to stuff the kitchen sink.
Oh, I know. They want to put everything in there. Absolutely. What are some things that a small or medium-sized company could do to get some publicity? What are some examples that the media loves?
They love stories. So storytelling, like what is the story? What is, not we have this, we're solving for this, here's the features, but what is the benefit of it? What is the benefit of that service? How is it going to help your audience? What is the need in the market? Not, oh, I came up with this and then I'm, retrofitting it. They also just love, somebody that knows their audience. So if you're reaching out to a publication, knowing, hey, you've covered X, Y, and Z consistently. This seems to be your beat. How about this kind of story? Or, I've really noticed this kind of trend happening. And in terms of that trend, well, here's what we do. So if you need quotes for a later story, so just because you're ready with your news at that moment does not mean that a reporter is writing about that at that moment, but certainly at another moment, they might be writing about trends, and then your story would be able to fit in. So not just saying, I exist, write about me. That's not going to get you press. It's what is that story behind it, and why should people care? And really, what's the gatekeeper? The gatekeeper is a reporter. Why should they care?
Yep, I love that. Thank you for that. Now, another thing that you do is, we've been talking about external stuff, but you also help companies with their internal communication, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so what are some tips, especially as we just have gone through and are still going through this pandemic. Some people are coming back to the office. Some people are not, and so there's a hybrid. There's a lot of things going on, a lot of different scenarios going on. What are some of your tips as we, God willing, start to get out of this pandemic to maximize our internal communication as a company?
So that is such a good question, because internal communications might mean over 8 countries, if people are working all over the place, and what does that look like? And how do you keep people connected? Also, in terms of recruitment, how do you bring people from the outside in? Once they're in, how do you get them to stay? Really asking these questions and seeing, a lot of that would have to do with the company culture, company leadership. Internal communication is anything from, what are we going to do internally as a company in terms of our response to crises? What are we going to do in response to our employees being all over the place? What are we doing about, vacation days? What are we do? All of these different things are internal. I worked for a company when I was at World 50 for a variety of reasons. There is no social presence. But the people that were working, there were a lot of millennials, and they wanted to share where they were going. They were going to super cool cities. They were going to, castles and meetings with like these, people that might have Secret Service protection. And so they couldn't share anything. Members could, but employees could not. And so it was really a struggle, because people might post something and then other people will be like, well, we're not supposed to. And so one of the things I did there was create a hashtag that was completely unrelated to the company. And after the trip was over and none of the executives were no longer there, you could vaguely post where you had been. You couldn't mention any names, but like if you wanted to post a picture of you landing in, Hong Kong, you could, and you could tag it with the company. So ultimately that became a hiring resource, because when you are looking to work at this company, you couldn't find anything online, and it was by design. But when we started this social media campaign, in terms of letting employees post, candidates were given that hashtag to search so they could see what kinds of things people were doing. And obviously it was, Instagram friendly and all of that, but it would give people a little more of an idea of what they were doing. And so that was really great for morale. People were so excited, to be able to do that. And that's, company is an anomaly, right? Most companies want their employees to be posting what they're doing. So really being able to tie that together with something that people can be proud of, I think is key.
Yeah, excellent. How are people, the companies that you're working with, how are they doing with, the whole Zoom, working from home / hybrid? I mean, the company's doing okay. Are they doing some best practices that you can share with us?
Yeah, most of my clients since March of 2020 have been home. So, and I think it is generally the companies that I work with have that flexibility to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think in terms of, there might be a Zoom overload. But some of the meetings I will, just say like, let's just go for a walk. We're catching up. Like you walk, I walk, done. And so that's been really good. And I think some people were getting back to the office, and obviously Delta has postponed those plans. So for the clients that I've been working with, I don't see people going back until maybe Q1, Q2 of 2022, which
Yeah.
I mean, by then it's people have been working from home for 2 years. So,
Yeah.
I've been working from home way longer than that. So this is not, I obviously worked in coffee shops and went to places and had in-person meetings. But the Zoom, I was not unfamiliar with Zoom in March of 2020.
Yeah, no, me too. Because of my podcast, I've been Zooming since 2016. So for me, same thing. A lot of people are going to come back to work next year, and they're going to be unrecognizable, right? Like, wow, you've been eating a lot, or wow, you decided not to shave for 2 years, right? I think COVID has just aged some people too, the stress of COVID, right? I probably look a little bit older. It's like, yeah, it's just, especially if you have kids at home all day, right? All of a sudden you're like, wow, did you age 5 years in 2 years? Right.
Well, so funny. I'm in a networking group that has people all over the world, and they happened to have an in-person meetup, in New York City. And so when I caught up with some people that had gone, I was like, what was it like to see like more than just this of people like in real life?
I know. Yeah. Oh, wow. You have legs. Interesting. Wow. So yeah.
Oh, you're really tall. Yeah. So I think that's interesting. And I think
I saw somebody that I had only seen on Zoom before. When I saw them, they were like, oh, you looked taller on Zoom. I'm like, I don't know how to take that, but well, Lori, this has been super fantastic. Thank you so much. If people, do want to get in touch with you and maybe just set up like a discovery call to see if they're if you're both a good fit to work together, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Sure. You can reach out to me on my website, which is elsus.com, which is ELSSSUS.com, which is Sussle backwards.
Oh, okay. All S's, a lot of S's. Yes.
Yes. You can find me as Lori Sussle Bonanni on LinkedIn. You can find Elsus has a company page on LinkedIn, and that one-to-one advisory I had mentioned is on the top menu of my website. And there's a way to schedule 15 minutes to see.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I do like your bite-size offer. It's, you're kind of getting the value of somebody that's worked with some huge, massive Fortune 100 companies, et cetera, to be able to give, strategy and skills and advice to a small business. So glad you're doing that. We appreciate it. And I hope people reach out. And everybody wants a personal introduction, you can always email me at david@davidmamano.com. Be happy to make a personal introduction to Lori. Or for that matter, any of my guests that I've had over the past 5 years. Crazy stuff. 5 years I've been doing this. So, well, Lori, thanks again. Appreciate it. And I wish you continued massive success. And thank you so much for sharing your heartbeats with us today.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I want to thank the Gonzo family as well for, once again, listening to the Gonzo Experience. Very honored. Hope they come back every Wednesday morning. We have a new podcast with great guests, just like Lori. And of course, got to add in there, please rate, review, all that good stuff. Pass on the Gonzo Experience. We would appreciate it. Thank you so much. Have a great day and make sure to stay awesome.